And lo, he said unto the sinful, Dead or alive, creep, you're coming with me. Tonight we are going to examine a story of a man born mortal, but with a special destiny. A man who devoted his life to upholding the law. A man who, in order to fulfill that destiny, had to be brutally killed by a corrupt regime before being resurrected and coming back to take sin away from mankind. You may think we're talking about Jesus Christ, but you'd be mistaken. We're talking about RoboCop, the American Jesus Christ. Let's consider the martyrdom of Officer Alex Murphy. In pursuit of justice, he faces off with Clarence Boddicker and his gang of thugs. Unlike so many of his corrupt fellow officers, Murphy won't let Boddicker go. He's committed to the takedown. Boddicker is forced to make a gruesome example of him in perhaps one of the most ultra-violent downfalls of a hero that had ever been presented on screen. It's difficult to communicate just how shocking the violence of that scene was at the time. Here is the hero of the movie being brutally gunned down and then sadistically shot to pieces. And we're about 30 minutes into the feature. It's a scene right out of the Passion Play. The flesh is not just destroyed, it is mocked, it is abused, it is humiliated in all its weakness. What chance does this weak, meaty stuff, this source of so much human suffering, stand against evil? The spirit of Murphy is correct, but the flesh fails him. How glorious, then, how miraculous that Murphy is to be born again. This time not a carnal creature of the world, but as an instrument of the Holy Spirit. His flesh stripped from his desiccated carcass and replaced with this metal carapace, gleaming and invulnerable like a knight in shining armor. It is in his new flesh that the spirit of Murphy and the body of Murphy find a divine symmetry. The reason RoboCop is more than a stupid movie about a guy who becomes a robot cop, and the reason is, along with the rest of the Verhoeven catalog, it will forever be known as a classic of social satire. You know, I'm realizing that I am fucking fevered as hell, and I'm not making any goddamn sense. This is horrible. The reason RoboCop is more than a stupid movie about a guy who becomes a robot cop, and the reason it, along with the rest of the Verhoeven catalog, will forever be known as classics of social satire, is how effective it was. Like many kids in the 80s, I thought I had some grasp of the world around me, and films like RoboCop honestly helped shape my class consciousness and my political values. I didn't see the movie on release. My parents rightly considered it too violent. But I got to read the comic book adaptation one day homesick from school. I learned valuable things. Things like the bad guys in the suits are the real evil ones. Forget the thugs in the streets with guns, the real bad guys were in boardrooms. Dick Jones wasn't a job creator, he was a fucking monster. OCP were not a force for good in the world, they were a force for insane, selfish scum who'd stomp all over poor people like me if it meant they got to keep riding in on the backs of Cadillacs. If you look carefully, the bad guys are all middle-aged, well-dressed white men. Verhoeven showed us exactly who the real enemy is. I didn't understand all this as acutely as I do now, but back then, under my covers, reading that comic book, I see a seed was planted, and it continued to be watered. Verhoeven kept feeding it with Starship Troopers, Total Recall, and all the rest. By the time I was 15, I had actually seen the movies and moved on to Sex Pistols records and Saul Alinsky books, and everything kind of fit neatly into place. By 17, I was arrested in my first act of political protest. I was a fucking radical and ready to take this thing on, and I'm not sure I would have been without Paul Verhoeven introducing me to American Jesus for the first time. Murphy was a blue-collar cop in a blue-collar town taking on white-collar scum. Murphy, like so many others in his shoes, died fighting those people. Go ask any number of indigenous people the world over what happened when they stood up to progress. Ask the victims of death squads in Latin America. Ask the victims of the Bhopal disaster in India. Normally you stand up to power and you go down pretty hard. Murphy came back. At first, we weren't sure if the machine or the spirit was going to win out, but in the end, Murphy found himself again. Reborn, built to endure, built to fight, built to save us from our real enemies. Dead or alive, creeps. Dead or alive. One way or another, you're going with him. And we have never needed a big, stupid metal machine gunning Jesus more in the history of mankind. Sadly, Verhoeven isn't making Hollywood movies anymore, and that probably means Dick Jones is laughing somewhere in hell while we wait for another one to come along.
Thank you, David. I will say this, man. Verhoeven does refer to his RoboCop film as his Jesus of Nazareth movie.
Yeah, he does.
He really, really does. And I mean, he's obviously obsessed with the story. You know, most people are. So this is without a doubt something that it does have those seeds, planted in RoboCop. There are a lot of similarities in the story, Dave. So you're definitely right on, Billy. Let's go with you, man, because I listen. I know you like this. You have to like this movie.
I like Verhoeven movies. RoboCop is not my favorite.
It's not your favorite.
I get it.
Oh man, this is like raw.
Yeah, but
Verhoeven.
I have nothing against it per se.
Fair, yeah.
Yeah, I just, it's like the style and everything is a little like, I get it, but it even as a kid, I think Peter Weller has something to do with it. That sort of putty faced chin and lips sticking out from under the helmet. Like as a kid, I was like, that's not cool. That guy looks like a dork, like, so it was like, I came to RoboCop a little bit later, although I did see it, I think late teens, and it actually traumatized me considerably. It was the most violent thing I'd ever seen.
And Dave says it wonderfully in his intro. The murder scene when Murphy is just brutally shot to death. I still, and rewatching, I haven't watched this movie in a while. Now, of course, I've seen it, dozens of times throughout my life. But, sitting down and watching it from beginning to end and just reliving that scene, Bill, man, when he gets his hand shot off and he's like, he can't even pick up his arm, it's just like, oh man. And it used to traumatize me as a child, as a young man too, man. So,
yeah, it was actually like emotionally scarring, like to the point that last year sometime RoboCop was on cable, and it was just the TV was running in the background, and I almost had to sit down and watch it just to overcome like a traumatic scar somewhere in my nervous system, and that is absolutely insane. And then I didn't think the movie could get any worse. And then, of course, probably the greatest death scene in any action movie ever is at the end when the guy gets like the chemicals dumped on him. I think when I was a kid and the car hits him, there was a simultaneous spray of puke across my living room. It was like I was so sick watching that. So
here's what I was thinking even before, and I forgot about that chemical scene, and it is gruesome. I mean, it definitely grosses you out without a doubt. But before that scene, and there were like maybe 2 or 3 other scenes, like the rape scene, and just the way some of Boddicker's henchmen were acting, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, boy, this is kind of trauma-esque in a lot of ways. Isn't it?
When I went back and watched it later, I didn't see this when I was a kid, but when you see it as coming back to an adult now, you go, oh my God. I mean, he's just he's completely lampooning the 80s like action movie tropes, it's literally a comedy if you see it that way,
Right. I mean, and the icing on the cake is the chemical, the after effect of the chemicals being dumped on that guy, or he crashes into it. And I'm just like, that's it. He has to be lampooning some trauma, and other 80s horror, sci-fi. Christiana, what are your reflections on Dave's intro and RoboCop?
That was great, man. I really appreciate the fact that this is like knowing films shape your perspective on political, political situations and everything. And it's amazing how much you pick up from films like this, and it informs your ethical stuff and morality and stuff. I did not see this film when I was a kid until I must have seen it when I was probably 17 or 18 years old. So I don't have that special place in my heart about it, but I do like it. I mean, it was only the second time I've seen it, to be honest with you. But yeah, I mean, Verhoeven's, all the stuff that you guys are talking about, what I really dig about the film is Verhoeven's Audacity, which I watched, obviously the two we're doing now and Basic Instinct last night. And his friggin', he's not timid, and that he's got the balls to go and, push the envelope.
Right.
And yeah, shooting that cop was crazy, but that boardroom killing was pretty fucking shocking to me. Even this last time that I saw it, I had no recollection of the film, like, almost at all. But then when that guy died in the boardroom like that, I was actually genuinely shocked.
Well, there's nothing more frightening than, like, that machine comes in there and there's a countdown, and he knows he's gonna die, and there's like no escape, and yet you're watching like the last 15 seconds of this dude's life. He's just, and then the fun. I mean, it's kind of Billy.
Well, Verhoeven's got this thing where it's pretty great, man. He does a lot of foreshadowing stuff that I guess sometimes it can be. I guess you could kind of look at it in a retrospective as being a little bit heavy-handed, but like he does it a lot in Total Recall, where you'll see like stuff like the mole or the fans, or like earlier on. And like in Basic Instinct, but he does a lot where he tells you what's going to happen, and then he kind of sort of builds the suspense and watches.
Well, his job,
like kind of the pleasure is watching it unfold.
Yeah, his job in Basic Instinct and Total Recall are similar in the fact that their endings are, they're not spoon-fed. They're not absolute. That it's really left to the.
Well, also like in I know.
Although
I don't mean to jump ahead, but like she wrote the book, so you're kind of questioning like how is it going to get there? It's because she that she wrote a book or whatever about getting the guy get killed or whatever, and then same thing with Total Recall. Like the whole movie's giving right before he gets that implant or doesn't get the implant,
right?
And then in this film, just what we were talking about, he's like the robots. You have 15 seconds to die. It's a very condensed version of that, but he definitely, he's got that sort of flair for telling you something awful is going to happen, and then, part of the fun of watching it is watching it unfold.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then making it way more awful than you imagined.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, oh, okay, so he's going to get shot. No, he's not just going to get shot. He's going to get shot like 1,000,000 fucking times.
Yes.
And you're going to see blood and meat just flying off of him. And this relentless as like shit just flies off of his body. And he collapses in a smoking heap.
And
that's why this movie's fucking awesome.
And it's all Verhoeven because, like the rape scene, for instance. That in the script, it just called for the RoboCop to shoot the guy in the head, as he got his clearance. But Verhoeven's like, you know what? It's much more effective if I take this a step further and have the guy get shot
Shoot her
between the legs, in the fucking groin. And he just does, Dave, right? He just does those little things that just can't, it kicks.
I always saw that as like Murphy coming through a little bit, fine. Sort of the machine is kind of controlling things, but Murphy gets to kind of I could shoot you in the fucking head, but I'm going to shoot you.
Yeah,
in the
because
dick.
there's character there.
Exactly.
And
that's the humanity of RoboCop. Yeah. He'll shoot you in the dick and not the head.
And
where appropriate.
Go on, Joe.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that's exactly what I love about it. It's just the audacity that he has in all of these films and Basic Instinct. And it's just still shocking after so many years, where I think some of the stuff, at least I find a little bit tired and like kind of mired in what we consider 80s cliches, kind of like those one-liners and stuff. But those scenes that we're talking about are still effective, and he's definitely got this weird gritty vibe to what he's doing. It's very rooted in the like the setting and the scene and all of his stuff, But even watching Basic Instinct just last night, it was just that opening scene is just, my wife and I were just watching it and we were like, wow, whoa. And because I don't remember that movie either. I must have saw it when I was 17 or 18. And for a film from the 80s that kind of has some of those like stuff that sort of like fell into sort of the 80s genre stuff that we kind of feel is like a little bit cliched now, for a film still to hold that kind of potency is definitely a tribute to him, testament to power.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's what I love about the guy, and I've always liked Verhoeven, his American stuff. Now, I don't know if any of you guys have seen anything before, or if you've seen Flesh and Blood or anything before that, the stuff he did in Europe.
I just watched Soldier of Orange. That's the only one that I could get. His Dutch stuff is pretty hard to get on DVD, actually.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
it's weird.
We actually just had like a big giant like Paul Verhoeven retrospective in Toronto that I totally missed because I'm a loser. It was all of his Dutch films and everything.
Yeah. He's a really good filmmaker, just without special effects or anything. Like, it's funny his reputation here is for science fiction, but I also saw the Black Book.
That's something he did about 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah, I saw that in the theater, and I was like, even without, it's so funny, man. He can get under your skin. He gets under your skin because of his filmmaking, not because of, if filmmakers working in special effects movies could learn anything, it's special. You can't lean on the special effects at all, because he can make you uncomfortable even with just actors in a room, So, yeah, he's pretty amazing, and his I can't remember this. I guess it's called Soldier of Orange. It's like a World War II espionage thriller, Even then, he's like fucking with your head a little bit in subtle ways. So,
but the Black Book is also a World War II movie.
Yeah, they're both. He grew up next to a German rocket base in the Netherlands, and this was during World War II. And he said the Allies were bombing this base constantly. It was what were the V-12 rockets? I think Gravity's Rainbow is about it. But anyway, the Allies were constantly bombing this base next to their house. And he said once that started, the whole neighborhood just turned into dead bodies in the street. Like, this is what he remembers from childhood growing up. And I read that. I was like, well, no wonder he grew up to make the movies that he did,
Dave, back to RoboCop. One thing that I really dig, particularly in both the movies that we're discussing tonight, is how Verhoeven casts his films. And he takes a big chance here in RoboCop with casting Ronnie Cox against type, and even Kurtwood Smith against type, and Peter Weller, who, I mean, he really has to sell this RoboCop character to the people. I mean, this is a really difficult role, but I get the feeling that Verhoeven is like, an actor's director, man.
Yes and no. Or at least to my knowledge, yes and no. Weller in particular was interesting. They actually hired he had a mime coach to teach him how to like walk around in the RoboCop suit.
Yes.
And that apparently didn't go very well, because when they actually got the RoboCop suit, he was practically fucking immobile in it. So all of the practice and training that he did kind of went out the window. He wasn't able to use a lot of it. So they had to sort of start all over again. But Verhoeven was like, no, we got to go. We got to go right now. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, fuck your mime coach. Like, we've got a movie to shoot, we've got things to do. And Verhoeven actually goes back and says that's one of the biggest mistakes that he ever made. He really regretted doing that to Peter Weller.
Yeah.
And he corrected it. My understanding, anyway, is that they actually ended up taking a few days off to the chagrin of the production and let Peter Weller get used to the suit and do what he had to do. But there was a time where he was just going to force him to go without it, and ended up feeling like quite a heel because of it. And the Ronnie Cox thing is neat too, because I mean, at the time, yeah, it was casting him against type, but
Absolutely.
now it's not.
Well, he discussed. I mean, Paul Verhoeven sets that in motion, because before that, Ronnie Cox was always like he's a fatherly figure or a good cop. We saw him in Deliverance, so on and so forth. And he, Verhoeven's just like, I'm casting this guy, and he's my bad guy. As a matter of fact, Kurtwood Smith auditioned for the Dick Jones role as well, and Smith, who also was always playing like the intellectual type, never really a bad guy. Verhoeven loved Smith's audition so much. He's like, I want him to be Clarence Boddicker.
He was so good as Clarence Boddicker.
Yeah,
I mean, he's so fucking menacing. He's so scary.
Everything works in this movie. Joe, speaking of the characters and the acting in the movie, Nancy Allen plays pretty much the only female part in this movie. Do you think that Verhoeven here just kind of downplays the role of the female in the story?
Downplays it. I don't know. I mean, yeah. You mean as
as far as not being a very strong character, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I guess I suppose it could have gotten developed a little bit more, their relationship, sort of in the first act. Right? You mean? Yeah. I mean, I kind of tend to think that Verhoeven's a real man's a man. He gets excited. I think he's really likes. He gets the women in the sexy roles, and it seems like they don't really have a depth, but I could be mistaken there. Right. Hey, is he too old to be making movies? Is that what's going on? Has he just retired?
No, he did a film in 2012, and he has 2 pictures in development right now. Yeah, one of them is Jesus of Nazareth, but I think that's something that he's just been trying to do for decades, Dave, right? Is the Jesus of Nazareth story?
Yeah, it's kind of his dream project. Right. And I mean, there's a lot of speculation as to why Verhoeven's kind of been out of the scene. He worked at a certain time, and I think he's probably coming around to a place where we kind of needed him for a while, and he wasn't there, and I think maybe we really need him badly again now.
It seems to me that he has dropped off the map. I mean, Billy, I know you saw The Black Book, and I think he did a movie in like just a year or 2 ago, but pretty much since Hollow Man, which wasn't really well received. I don't mind Hollow Man. It's nothing great, but
it's just underwhelming, which it's like it's adequate as movies go, but for a Paul Verhoeven movie, you really just sort of set the bar.
Right, Hollow Man. Yeah, Hollow Man's the kind of thing where, like, if you're in your living room during the afternoon or the evening and you're surfing and you come across Hollow Man, like, you'll stop for like 10 or 15 minutes, and then then you'll just move on from there.
Yeah. I think I only saw it once. I saw it in the theater, and that was it.
Yeah, I do want to save Starship Troopers for a Total Recall discussion, Joe. But I do want to get back to Basic Instinct. You hadn't seen it probably in 20 years, so your memory wasn't that great about it. What did you really think about it? I mean, did you enjoy it?
Oh, it was a lot. It was a lot of fun.
It was, right? Because I rewatched it too, and I really had a great time.
Yeah, it's a Joe Esterhaus script.
Right,
It took me back to
the $10 million screenwriter.
Yeah, for 1 page or whatever.
Yeah, $10 million a page.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of see what's coming I feel like I'm almost all these. Well, yeah, I kind of sense what was coming. Maybe that's because I had seen it already, but it was really weird experience because I watched it but had no recollection of it, and then was surprised by it, but then felt like I could kind of see what was going on. But yeah, I really dug it, man. It's got that Fatal Attraction thing going on too.
Totally.
Like I know that they had like
well,
I don't know
mean,
which
you got
one
Michael
was first.
Douglas. I mean, that's
That's right.
That'll help.
Yeah.
That'll help with the similarity. But
yeah, I love going back to those.
I like Fatal
films,
Attraction too.
I like his bad guys are really a lot of fun.
Well, I like his like down and dirty characters with Michael Douglas. Like where there's kind of like. Well, how does Vince Vaughn says this in a movie? In Swingers, where he's convincing his friend to stop being so PG-13 when he approaches women. He's like, I don't want you to be that guy in the PG-13 movie that everyone's rooting for, that you hope gets the girl. I want you to be the guy in the rated R movie that you don't like. And Douglas is that guy a lot of the time.
Yeah, well, like that's the thing, man.
You're not too sure if you like him or not.
It's just I was again just surprised at all of these films how he pushes the envelope, man, and it takes a lot of balls to do what he does.
Yeah.
What about Showgirls, Tom?
See, I did not go back, and my experience with Showgirls is very limited. So I'll be honest with you.
I only saw.
I don't even think I watched the whole. I think it was on one night, and I saw some of it, but I really don't have. I can't really have an intelligent.
That's another Esterhaus, right? That's his name, right?
But
that's another.
Here's the thing: in doing research for Paul Verhoeven, you read a lot about Showgirls, and you read about how much of a disaster that this was when it came out. But here's the thing, and we talked about this very briefly for some reason a few months ago on the show. But for some reason, that this Showgirls movie almost lives larger than anything that he's ever done. It has a huge cult following, and there are some people that think that Showgirls is an absolute brilliant piece of cinema.
I don't know. From my perception is that it's a hipster thing where people are watching it because it's so bad.
Like the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
No, I think it's a little
actually, yeah. They do midnight screens.
They do midnight screenings, but it's not in the
Billy, you know what I'm saying.
But it's not in the same spirit as Rocky Horror.
No, not in the same spirit, but like I'm saying that the
movie
people are celebrating something that's so awful.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So Rocky Horror was intentionally campy. This one, I don't think Showgirls was intentionally campy, was it? Or what?
I don't know. I'd have to go. I don't. You know what? Probably not, Joe. It probably wasn't intentionally campy, but I'm not certain. I mean, I'd have to watch the movie. Now, did anybody watch Showgirls recently?
I did.
I kind of.
Well, hold on. Billy just saw it.
I did. It's hard for me to put my finger. There's this.
I love it. Billy's talk. Billy, talk.
He's an interesting character, that director, because it's like it's hard to tell how much he's yanking your chain and not, because he's so good at doing like the overheated, sweaty filmmaking. That you're like, is he being serious about this, or is he just bullshitting? Yeah. And Showgirls is so. It's definitely the same sort of satirical thing, but it's about obviously the abuse of entertainment industry people and all of that, and but it's so bad. It's so bad. It's like, I know you're doing this to show how awful this situation is, but then your film is also not that great too. So it's like it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me quite the way his earlier stuff did.
What is it? The script? I mean, is it just the dialogue is just so awful?
Yeah, nothing much happens. That's a major problem. It's just sort of goes from point A to B to C and then ends.
Huh.
I did notice in Basic Instinct there are moments, and it might be the screenwriting thing, where it gets like the exposition. It's a little canny, you know what I mean? Like a little wooden here and there, even in Basic Instinct. Although, he does a great job with the actors in that film for the most part. But there's like stuff in that boardroom, Tom, when, the guy, they bring in the psychologist, and he kind of looks like a psychologist that he looks like a guy playing a psychologist.
Right.
What,
you know what I mean?
interrogation scene?
Verhoeven
No.
He makes movies about the movies that have been made before, right? Like he's showing you he's like lampooning the way Hollywood makes those movies.
Is he? Well, that's the question.
You get the feeling.
Definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. Well,
although, like screenplay wise, like my girlfriend and I watched Basic Instinct a couple nights ago, and she afterwards said, I think they've ruined it by making you think, like having too many sex scenes where you think she's gonna kill someone. Like, and it's kind of true. By the end of the movie, you're like, she's done her whole like leaning backward to grab the ice pick routine like 3 times now. Like I don't really care. Like kill him for fuck's sake,
Oh my God.
Yeah, like I notice sometimes he's just like heavy-handed, and I question like how intentional it is, like even that interrogation scene in Basic Instinct. I don't mean to. I'm sorry that we're moving into that, but anyway, yeah. So he like even the way that's lit, like it's great because it's almost expressionistic. But there's a point where like now I don't know if it's because of this perspective where everything's got I don't know, but I just you're thinking it's like almost distracting how like expressionistic it is, and you're just kind of trying to figure out if he's like what tone he's got in mind for it. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. It's like really heavily shadowed and like this grid over it, and there's no interrogation room in any place that looks like that. You know what I mean?
You know what I'm saying? Head there is.
And I
he's
get it,
creating like a noir, right? Almost. Like,
I know. It's just
and a
it's
mystery.
sometimes...
I mean, after all, it's a mystery. So I mean, in that sense, he's doing a great job.
But he's definitely he's going over the top. That's his whole
He's going over the top, and sometimes it gets distracting. Like it's a little incongruous from some of the other stuff. Like some of the other scenes are really naturally lit, or you know what I mean. So it feels a little
beautifully shot. It is amazing.
Yeah, it is.
I think all of his films that I've seen are all beautifully shot. Like he certainly has a style, and his movies don't look like shit. And that's one thing I always appreciate from a director, when you can look at the screen and go, "Yeah, that's Paul Verhoeven," and he has that. He has that quality.
Well, the one thing one of the other things I really love about RoboCop is that feel of that gritty, that actual gritty feel, which. It feels really genuine. You know,
it doesn't feel like the modern quote gritty unquote is always like just a smudge here and a smudge there, and otherwise everyone's nice and clean and freshly showered.
Yeah, like grit and grime isn't like aren't compositional elements. You know what I mean? Like
right. Dave, do you want to jump in on any of this Basic Instinct chatter?
No, I don't give a shit about Basic Instinct.
He doesn't care about it, Joe. No. He's not interested at all. Whatsoever. He has nothing to say about Basic Instinct.
I've never seen it.
No one is gonna fill the Max Cook void here and ask about Sharon Stone's void.
Joe, you can do it.
Now Billy, when you and your girl when you and
now he gets the voice.
Now, Billy, when you and your girlfriend are watching Basic Instinct and she uncrosses her legs with that sweet nectar juice, do you pause the scene and inspect the hey nanny nanny and then put your finger on your girlfriend's nanny nanny? Would she take offense to that in such a scene?
Absolutely.
I demand you answer that. Now, Thomas, Billy's going to avoid that question. Watch Billy avoid the question.
Oh, Billy.
Go ahead, William.
Oh my God. Yeah, Tom, I think you better move the show along.
Fair enough. Hey,
guys. I just want to say I have something very intellectual to say about Sharon Stone's vagina.
Anything else on RoboCop, Dave, Billy, Joe, before we move on to Total Recall, where we will continue to discuss Paul Verhoeven? I'll take that as a no. Guys, let's keep it moving. We're going to talk about Total Recall next, and Mr. Billy Barassa is going to give you the introduction. Billy, let's